There it is. We are live. Welcome, LabCoatNation, to our second webinar with Luis Diaz. So if you missed the first one, Luis is a podcast expert. He's got a platform called Podcast Domination. He has, I believe, at least according to your website, 47 podcast launches in the last few years, over 5 million downloads under your belt. You are, kind of know what you're doing when it comes to podcasting. But I think, Luis, what's most important here and what we're going to talk about, I want to set the table for today before we kind of reintroduce you, is, podcasting in general it's very taboo. It's become very popular. But the question really is, how do you build it into my business? How do I make money? What do I do to make it have a value, right? And I want to set the table by saying it's not growing a show that's going to compete with the big boys and have hundreds of thousands of downloads and you're going to sell advertising. It's building a brand. It's bringing value to your audience. And we're going to get into that today. So Luis, welcome back. Let's start with, reminding and reintroducing yourself to our audience about who you are, what you do, and kind of how you came up to where you are today.
Sure. Thanks for having me again, Jeff. So kind of the short story of how I got here was I was an online trainer, a mentor of mine who at the time said, hey, you should get into podcasting. And I literally bought like a $12 course, taught myself how to do it, failed miserably the first time I tried. I kind of going with the same way, what you're just saying there, trying to compete against the big boys, trying to compete against having too broad of an audience, too many things you're talking about to where it's not focusing on one specific person solving their problems. And I failed miserably, went back to the drawing board, learned a little bit more, started studying some of the top marketers in the world, what they were doing, guys like Frank Kern, and then started to apply that to the podcasting space. And about 9 months later, I started to monetize it through coaching and having people reach out to me and inquiring about like consulting and fitness health and coaching, things like that. And then I started to help other people do the same thing I did the next year in 2017, where I took one of our first shows from 33,000 downloads a month to over 110,000 downloads a month. Wow. And that was literally just applying the same principles that I found work in relationship building, which we'll get into a lot here today, especially for real estate agents. And then also just online marketing principles about kind of what you're saying about delivering the right value to the right audience. And then getting them to kind of take the next step with you in that journey, whether that's getting them to a webinar or getting them to sales page or getting them on the phone with you. So through that kind of journey of learning and failing and testing it and working with other people, that's kind of where we're at today. We help people launch podcasts, and then we also help them grow podcasts with our consultancy. So that's kind of what I do full time today. And it's been a fun ride. So excited to kind of share some new things here with you guys in 2021 because a lot's changing. However, the game, even though the players change, the game is still the same. So that's really fun to dive into. So
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Well, let's talk about, let's start at the very beginning, because I don't think most realtors or salespeople in general even know where to start when it comes to doing a podcast, other than the obvious. Like, I need to maybe have Zoom and a microphone, and I need to get guests, and I need to talk about something. But I know it's more in depth than that. So where do you suggest anybody get started, or how do you get started on a podcast before we kind of get into the whole point of why you would do a podcast?
Yeah, I think for me, especially because we've got some clients who are in the real estate space. So it comes down to the same question I asked them, and that's like, what do you want out of this? Like, do you want to just be the number one guy in your market? Do you want to have real deep relationships with, a certain type of group of people in your region? So what exactly do you want? Because I've seen a lot of different podcasts for different reasons. Some of them are lead gen, some are just awareness, some are as actually a sales funnel. So I like to look, how do we got to get on the same page in terms of aligning the goals and then to how the podcast is going to be set up. Because those are two different, those are very important things. I've seen a lot of people build a podcast the normal way, and then it's completely different from it's not aligned with their goals of what they're actually looking to do with the show. So I think that's the step. That's the first step, is kind of starting with the end in mind and figuring out for you, or for the real estate agent listening to this, watching this, what exactly do we want to do at the end of the day? Because there's other tools besides podcasting. We both know them. Like, there's tons of social media channels we could use. So why is podcasting uniquely better than, those are the tools to accomplish this goal that you have? Mm-hmm. That's really where I start when it comes to that. Because once we know that, Jeff, we can then figure out what's the call to action, what's the content, what's the name and positioning of the show. And those are kind of the big pillars, I would say, or dominoes that we can knock down after we understand where exactly what this podcast is going to lead to.
So what do you see? So you mentioned that you have real estate clients. Mm-hmm. What is the common denominator of where they start, or what it is that they want to accomplish? Is it to produce, community content? Is it what do you typically find? Because I want to try to identify. So for those that are listening today, they're listening for a reason. They're interested in potentially podcasting. So I want to help them kind of take those next steps to get to that level. And if it's just introducing them to you, that's a win as well. But what do you see? Like, what is one of the more common avenues that a realtor goes down when creating a podcast, or why they want to create said podcast?
Yeah. A lot of them want to create the podcast because they know it's a way to advance their networking, or basically get into claim mind share inside of the brains of all of those local public figures, whether it's the local business owners, chamber of commerce, whether it's the people who, different people in the banking industry or the finance space. A lot of times it's to get in front of and claim mind share inside of those people's heads. That's the thing. They kind of want to be the not industry, but like the celebrity or the person that everyone knows around their industry or space. And networking now with COVID, in a COVID world we live in, like, it's kind of hard to go to networking events. Depending on where you're living, it's either non-existent or it's very limited. So this is a way for them to continue to build those relationships that they need and they know they need in order to advance their business without having to virtually or having to be somewhere physically. And the cool thing about podcasting I've found is that there's a lot of things you can do, both on the front end of the interview and then also the back end of the interview, to really nurture the relationship well. Which, if you've got those systems in place, then it can be something that you can, have an assistant or yourself go and find 5 to 10 people that are really great fits for you, and then put them through this kind of system of, pre-interview, interview, post-interview, follow-up, that really allows you to nurture a relationship.
I love what you said there. I want to re-articulate what you said, which I would call it passive networking. And I think what Luis is telling us here, which is really smart, actually, when you think to yourself and you're in your community and you want to get connected to important people, because important people create opportunity and end up creating larger networks for you. We go to chambers of commerces and we go to BNIs and we go to traditional, means, right? And which don't exist right now in most markets. Even if they did, it's still traditional. There's no differentiation. And I love what you're saying here is the way I took it is that you want to get in with these people. You want to get in with some people that you want to get connected to. Start a podcast and have them as a guest. They're not going to go back search to see how many listeners you have or how many downloads you have. They're just honored to be a guest. Therefore, you're basically bringing them value while also lifting up your status, not only with them, but with your potential audience when they see that you're interviewing the mayor or, a business owner in your community. And I love that, dude. I mean, I don't think we think about that. I think when we think podcasting, we just think of like the big names in the podcasting world. And we don't actually think about how can I use this to elevate my business? And in your case, it's not about the podcast itself. It's about the networking aspect. That's really, really smart. And I've never really thought of it that way. I love that you shared that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. And I think for me, like, I have multiple podcasts for the reason of they have different purposes in my marketing funnel. for example, I have a podcast that's for authority. Like I go on there and I talk about podcasting because that's what I know. Then I have another show that talks about just helping entrepreneurs solve their biggest mistake, where I interview other entrepreneurs about their most expensive mistake, right? So I can bring a large variety of people on that one. And then I've got another one that I do with a co-host. So these are all different ways you can do it. But for the real estate agent listening, like you just need one podcast that is going to help you nurture relationships with your ideal market. So one key mistake I see people, or a lot of entrepreneurs or real estate agents making, is that they make their podcast really, really broad, where you'd want to kind of niche down. If you're just talking to maybe commercial real estate, if you're just doing commercial, then look at the people who would be, you could interview for a commercial real estate podcast, or even just a podcast that would attract those kind of people, bankers, entrepreneurs, people who are buying commercial real estate. What kind of podcast could you make that would be easy enough to say, it would make sense for them to come on as a guest? Don't make it really, really broad, because then it just kind of gets watered down. And you want to have something that's you're going to be proud of. And you can be like, hey, like, people listen to this and they get value. So that's one thing I'd say to make sure you are cautious of, because there's a lot of watered down podcasts on there. So get a little bit more specific to the type of market you're in. And even like the actual location, like location-based podcasts are great, because the benefit you have there is that it's a limited pool you're actually marketing to. So you can be really targeted with your promotion, because you know where your audience is at.
No, I love that. And we teach that with like a digital mayor strategy, is to focus on micro, not macro. And, but let me ask you this. So why podcasting versus just creating a Facebook group built around a certain community where you're essentially doing the same thing? What is the difference and or the advantage potentially to podcasting versus doing something like that?
Right. So I think a couple of things. Number one is controllability. Like, I can control my podcast. It is my domain. There's no one who can take it away from me. Like, you can go to your Facebook group tomorrow and it can get shut down. You can get banned. You can get spammers in there, or you can just get hacked. Like, I've had a lot of clients who've gotten their accounts hacked and they get to start from zero. Cool thing about podcasting is that you don't have to worry about that, right? You own it 100% outright. You can say whatever you want, do whatever you want. It's your show. So I do like that aspect. It's kind of like an email list from that aspect, right? It's your property. The second thing here too is, yes, you could go online and do Facebook Lives, but what percentage of those people, what percentage is actually getting watched? I'd rather take the approach of doing a video podcast, kind of like what we're doing right now, Jeff, and then using that afterwards as maybe a Facebook Live as a second tier. But I like to do this because it's much easier to just have a one-to-one conversation and build a deeper relationship. Because I think real estate's a bit like podcasting with my business, right? Like, I don't need a huge audience. That's great and all, but if I have maybe 5 key relationships or a handful of key relationships, that can make me a lot of money, and that can be a serious business driver. Like, I don't need to have a ton of lukewarm relationships. I just need a few good ones that go deep. So the cool thing about that is, obviously, is like, podcasts can give that to you. And I think, yes, you can weave in the kind of the Facebook group strategy there on the back end and repurposing that stuff or sharing that out with that audience too. But I do like that. The reason for podcasting is you can control it, right? And you can go deep. And then the last part, we haven't touched on this yet, Jeff, is that your follow-up process after that podcast, and also the kind of onboarding, are opportunities for you to wow that person and make a statement and make an actual, like, kind of a lasting look of like who you are, how you operate your business, and how you actually conduct yourself. For me, those are 2 big things I think a lot of people miss, or opportunities where we can make a lasting impression.
Awesome. So when it comes to, and that's great, because I don't think a lot of us think about that. And honestly, that was kind of a genuine question, more from myself as much as it is anybody else. So let's just say now, I'm the salesperson. I'm the real estate agent. I've moved past all of this now. I'm fairly committed to it. I know I want to do it. Where do I get started? How do I come up with a name? How do I come up with that niche? And literally, what do I do? Where do I record these? Where do you recommend I do that? Should I do them live? Should I do them virtual? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. The cool thing about it is that you really just need a microphone, like I'm missing right now because tech issues. But you really just need a microphone and a Zoom account, or you can use other softwares. But I'd say for most people, Zoom is going to be the easiest. So in terms of a tech setup, that's really all you need. I wouldn't say going live would be the best starting off, because there's just so much you have to focus on. And then most people are like, looking at comments and trying to see if we're on Facebook already. Is it started yet? So I think that stuff's great, but we can leave it till later until you kind of get more comfortable with just getting on the mic and being in front of the camera. So for starters, Zoom call or Zoom, a microphone. And what I like to do typically when I'm doing solos, I'll have a Google doc sheet kind of out. So I have the kind of an outline of what I'm going to say. What's the key points? What's the call to action? And those are kind of the three main things you need in terms of like, hey, if I wanted to get going today and create content on and you eventually use it for a podcast, those are the main things. We can totally get into the details though if you want, in terms of like other key pieces to get your podcast up there. I just don't know how deep you want to take it, because this is a lot to go.
Well, I think an overview is important. I think, obviously if somebody wants to go that deep, they need to reach out to somebody like yourself to obviously, to go into the weeds. We only have so much time here. So, take it another step further without going too deep, so we don't run out of time.
Cool. Yeah. Cause this would be a lot of notes for someone, but besides that, you will need what's called a hosting account. Basically, you can use Anchor. You can use other ones, like I use Captivate. It's basically a place to store all this podcast content and then obviously distribute it out to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all these places that people listen to them.
So explain that real quick. So that's like a Libsyn as well, right? So in other words, once you record it, now you have it locally or in the cloud somewhere. You have to upload it to a service that auto distributes it to podcasting mediums, correct? Exactly.
Yeah. So that's kind of like your kind of like mission control for the podcast. It's going to keep all the content there. It's going to be where you're looking at like your numbers, being able to figure out like, hey, like which episode did best. So it's going to help you track and analyze your podcast as well. Those are one of the things that you can't, like, obviously you can't have a podcast without that. So one of the big basics.
Let me ask you one more question about that. What kind of costs can someone expect to pay to have for do one of these services? Are there free ones, or are they all paid? And how much can someone expect to pay for that?
That's a great question. So anywhere from $0 upwards to $100 a month is the typical range. Everyone I've seen is in that range of 0 to 100. I pay $20 a month for mine. You can pay in full for a year and for a little bit less. So it's really, really economical, really reasonable.
And once you're in that platform, is it automatically distributing you out to certain number of platforms? Do you need to apply to be, to be on Apple's? Do you need to apply to be on Spotify or these various platforms, or is it automatic? How does that work?
Yeah. So some of them are automatic. Places like the smaller places like Apple, Google, Spotify, they have a little bit of a submission process that you've got to go through, and then they'll give you a yes or a no within a few days. The only way you're going to get a no is if you have like profanity or a lot of profanity, like, obviously obscene content, adult content, things like that. Most people here listening to this are not going to have that problem, right? Besides that, though, you'll get some automatic ones, like I said, and then you have to apply to a couple other ones. Just to give you an idea, there's about 24, 25, maybe more places that podcasts can be listened to, at least to my knowledge. So obviously, if you can get on all of those, it's great. So you may have to do a little bit of digging and research to find all the other places. I think I have a checklist I can give you guys so we can share with the audience, everyone else. It's a bit of a Google Doc that has all the lists of all of them on there. That makes it much easier. So you want to make sure from a distribution standpoint, like if you're trying to get in front of as many people, and we don't really know where everyone's listening to, probably a large percentage of them are on Apple, but there's still other people who could be potential, customers or leads or relationships in the future that are listening to other places. So getting everywhere and distributing the podcast is super important once you set that account up. And then besides that, any other questions before we move on to the hosting account? I got a few other key pieces here.
I could keep asking questions, but let's keep going.
Cool. Besides that, a couple other key pieces for a marketing standpoint that I want to make sure we cover here, especially if you're a real estate agent or someone in the real estate space. There's a lot of competition out there for real estate agents. So a couple of key things you're going to want to make sure you get right here. Number one, your artwork. Having compelling artwork. A quick, easy tip I gift for that is to go into Apple, type in real estate, and maybe it's a real estate in Chicago, and see what podcasts are out there. Look at all of them, listen to a few of them, look at how you can be different from their artwork, because they're probably going to have, I would say, your blues, a lot of blue like artwork out there, different shades of blues and blacks and reds. See how you can be different and stand out amongst all those other competitors in your space. And then the other part is title. So a couple of things with your title. What I learned from Dan Henry was this: think of the result your customer wants, and then condense that result down into 2 or 3 words, or as few words as possible. So if it's like they want to find the dream home in Phoenix, Arizona, condense that down to maybe like your dream Phoenix home, whatever it could be. But think about the result, condense that down into as small of a statement as you possibly can be, and that's ideally going to be your title, right?
Is it similar to like keywords? Is that kind of the goal here?
Yes. Yeah. You're playing to 2 audiences, right? You're playing to the person who's looking for help in their market or whatever it may be they're looking for. And then you're also playing towards, you're looking to help the algorithms find you or promote you when someone types in the right keywords. So you're going to want to make sure you look at some of the keywords that the other competitors have. And I like to do just a simple search. Like if I was someone looking for help in this market, what would I type in? There's tons of tools out there that can help you. One of my favorites is it's by Neil Patel. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his podcast, Marketing School. He's got a really good SEO tool. If you just go to neilpatel.com, you'll be able to find it. But that's a great SEO tool if you're looking to find like what are the keywords that similar podcasts or similar websites are using, and I'll pull from those and see if I can come up with a title that makes sense.
I love that. And in other words, get in the head of your target audience, your avatar, figure out what it is they're searching, and build your title around that. That's the key. Don't be thinking it's just like content on social media. I say this all the time. Don't produce content based on what you think your audience wants. Do it based, run some tests, like figure out what it is that they want, do some searching, search some other podcasts, like Luis says, and give them what they want, not what you think they want, because there's a big difference.
Big time. Yeah. Case in point, we had a client. One of the things we always do is we do a survey for our, like a listener survey. So we have swipe email templates and social media posts that we have them send out to their audience to gather information for exactly that, Jeff. So we have an idea of what the title is. We know what kind of content, what kind of pain points they have. We know what they want at the end of the day. And we gave it to one of our clients, and he didn't have a big audience, but he got 20 responses. And he sent me a Vox yesterday. He's like, I have so much content to create now because of these 20 respondents that filled out this little survey. Yeah. And now it's basically written his whole content calendar. Yeah. And he's got a really clear picture of where they're struggling and what the issue is and the pain points he can hit. So a little survey, like literally just put it up on a Google Doc, asking about their problems and pain points, what their end result is, like what's the goal for them. Another question I would add in there besides those two, if you're doing a little survey like this, you're going to start a podcast, is if you were just like hanging out with me, or if you were, could ask me anything, what would it be? Right. Because people will kind of open up to you and they'll get a little bit like, oh, okay, well, if I could just ask you anything, it would be this. You can speak to them there's almost like they're speaking to you on a one-to-one level.
Yeah.
So that little survey is another great piece. I'm glad you brought that up, because like that research will really help you clarify of like, what are you thinking they want and what do they actually want? And there's normally some pretty big ahas you'll find in that once you've gone through that.
Yeah. And you didn't mention either. Just do a social media post. Just put a post out asking a question. People, it's like, it's the old adage where if you put on Facebook, I need a plumber, you're going to get 25 replies, because it's just human nature and it's like, we have no vested interest in referring a plumber. We just want to help. And it's so simple. Just do it, or send out an email to your database or whatever. There's so many different ways you could do this. I love that. It's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're struggling, if you have people too, they struggle with this, I go to Reddit and I go to forums, or you go to Amazon, and you look at the bestseller list and you look at the reviews from that book that's relevant to your podcast. There's so many other places too that when I was getting started, I didn't have an audience, maybe like some people here. So I had to go and find the questions and then deliver the answers. But I was looking at forums. So those are other good resources as well. If you're like, I don't have a huge audience, how can I get, at least, 5 to 10 respondents? So that's the key piece. So we've covered, hosting accounts, artwork, and title. Outside of that, there's really only one other piece I would say is necessary, as a high level overview. And that's having a compelling intro and outro. The intro, because you want to make sure people know that they're in the right space. They came to the right place, and you're going to deliver on the promise that you got them to click with. Because a lot of times we've seen podcasts, or I'll analyze them, they'll have a really sharp drop from the 0-second mark to the 30-second mark. And that typically means that people either A, skipped it, or they B, just left because they're like, this isn't a fit. Like I clicked on, how to buy the best home I could, the best investment property in Phoenix. And now they're talking about, maybe like the best hamburger place in Phoenix. And that's like not what I want. So really, really having a compelling intro that says like, hey, whatever you clicked on is what we're going to deliver. So you want to make sure you state the actual intro or the name of the podcast. Like, welcome to the LabCoatAgents show. I'm Jeff. Here we help you unlock blank, blank, blank to achieve X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Really clear benefit statement. And then shut up and get into the podcast. On the back end, the outro, we want to make sure we actually have one unique or one specific thing that we want them to do. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not go follow me on social media. Hey, here's the next step for you if you're looking to get X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And always framing the actions in the benefit of the listener. Like the next step for you, if you're a real estate agent and you want to, make the 7-figure mark this year, or you want to achieve X, Y, Z this year, is this. Yep. That could be go to your Facebook group and join. So now you guys have a great Facebook group. That could be something else.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that too, because this is what we teach on video, which is have a really good hook and always have a call to action. And basically it's like set the table in the very beginning, give them a tease about what it's going to be about, but just enough to have them wanting more. That's a hook. And then at the end, the biggest mistake a lot of us make is not having a good call to action. We just gave them all this awesome stuff and then didn't do anything, didn't give them anything to do with it. And you need to actually have them take action. And I love that. It doesn't, basically what you're telling me is that applies to pretty much all forms of marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny is like what you guys teach in organic marketing and your marketing system I bet you that it could be directly applied to podcasting. Just put the exact strategies, how you frame the calls to actions and the intros and outros. Yes. I found that a lot of good organic marketers make good podcasters as well, because they understand the basics and they understand what's needed in every single content piece. So that's a great point. I'm glad you drew that parallel.
Love it, man. So, okay. I think we've really set a really good table here for podcasting in general, and why it's differentiating and why it might even be better, why it is potentially better, because you can really control the narrative and you can cross promote it, and you can use that content in so many different ways versus going live on social media. Right. So if somebody says, all right, I get it all, but I don't really want to do it. I don't want to create a bunch of more work for myself. I don't want this to become a time suck. What do you suggest? Like, what does your service do for anybody who wants to start a podcast to make this potentially easier for them?
Yeah. I get that a lot. It's like, I don't want to create another job for myself. So I totally get that, because it can be. So basically what we have is a white label service, or a white glove service, where we'll do it all for you. Basically, outside of recording your own content and picking a few of the different details, design elements, you just record it and send it to us, and we take care of the rest. That being the editing, and obviously the setting up and sending the podcast out to all the platforms, and then creating social media assets for you to actually share and promote. One of the things we're toying with right now is helping people book guests, because we found that that's a bigger demand. People want to be guests, and obviously and get on, or have people come on their podcast that are influential and that are in their market, right? So we're toying around with figuring out how we can help people do that as well. But that's basically what we do, is more of a white glove service, to kind of keep you doing what you do best, and obviously let us handle the rest. But yeah, that's kind of the basics. Any other questions, man?
How do they get a hold of you? How do they find you?
Best place, most of your eyes are on Facebook. I'm on Facebook as well. Luis Diaz is one way, or just go to podcastdomination.co, and there's plenty of details there.
Awesome. And is there any place that they can go to see any potential examples of the work that you do? Or is there anybody that you would say, you already mentioned Neil Patel. Is there anything else that you would suggest to anyone that says, I kind of want to see what we're talking about here? Like, how would I cross promote this, or how would I do this, or how would I do that? Is there anything that you would suggest there?
Yeah. So we've got, if you go to podcastdomination.co/proof, there's a whole bunch of people there who have great success stories, and people who are still doing it. But I'd say, if you guys wanted a really good example of somebody who's doing it right, they're not my client, but they're just doing it right, and I love them. It would be a guy named Alex Sharfin. Alex is he's like a business coach, but basically the way he does his podcast, if you guys want a really darn good example of, like, here's a profitable show that is simple, he gets on, he talks, he promotes his stuff, and he makes a good amount of money from it because his content and because of how he's doing it. It's Alex Sharfin. It's called Momentum. And that podcast, I'd say, it's not a real estate podcast, but you can adapt those principles over to real estate. It is a great show for learning and listening of someone who's doing it right. And then Neil Patel, like I said before, those guys are great as well. They have a great show, and they do it right as well, if you want to model success.
Awesome. So what, anything to share in closing?
I think 2021 is nobody wants to think about 2020. For at least most people, 2021 is going to be a year where you see a lot of big changes in podcasting. A lot of big players like Amazon, Spotify are starting to claim more of the market share. And I do think when you put it together with Clubhouse, it is a pretty interesting tool, audio, your voice, and what you can do with it. So I'd say the more you can get on the mic, whether that's Clubhouse or podcasting or whatever, the more money you're going to make in 2021.
I love that. And don't forget, because you mentioned Clubhouse, like, this content, for those of you that are wanting to build a YouTube channel, for example, this can be used for that too, because a lot of times, like obviously I host the LabCoatAgents podcast, this is a webinar, but I do them just like this because it's easier to do it face to face. Right. And then we cross promote, we cross post that stuff to YouTube as YouTube content. And it's a great way to create some content for a YouTube page, create a playlist around what it is you're wanting to do. And then you could have multiple different playlists. It could be community content. It could be industry content. It could be a variety of things. I love the way you've kind of positioned podcasting is not the way, at least I typically think of it, which is just that typical, audio only. I listen to it in the car, or on my commute, or on the treadmill, right? There's so much more to podcasting, and there's so much more potential leverage for your business and how you can use the podcasting, like with the networking. I love that. I think I think there's a lot of value to it. And for those that joined today, I hope you gained something from this and can run with this in 2021, because there's a hell of an opportunity. Podcasting is not going away. It's only going to become more and more popular, and those who use it most effectively are going to find the most rewards.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks again, Jeff. Been fun. I had one more thing to say. Yeah, it's kind of going back to, it's kind of like Facebook ads in the early days. People who learned it, mastered it, they're doing really good now. Yep. Same thing with video. So I think audio is going to be the same thing. So get in early and get going.
Embrace. I love it, man. Luis, thank you again. It's been fun. I appreciate your insight. And remember, go check out podcastdomination.co, correct?
Yeah, CO, not COM.
Got it.
Yeah,
.co. Podcastdomination.co. Go check it out. Luis can help you take your podcast, get it off the ground, and do so many other things with it. I'd love to see some results from some of you. Make sure you share it in the LabCoat Nation. And thank you so much for joining us today, Luis. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again, guys.
See you, man.